Big statement made by the Director Generals of Military Operations, Naval Operations and Air Operations on India's achievements as part of Operation Sindoor. And the point that was constantly made by the Indian Armed Forces, their task, their initial task was only to carry out strikes against terrorist bases, and that's exactly what they did. And they achieved overwhelming success in their initial operations. India did not want to escalate. It's because Pakistan Armed Forces targeted a number of Indian locations, or attempted to target a number of Indian locations in response to India targeting terror bases in Pakistan, that India was forced to carry out a further action. And that further action has had some amazing results, some spectacular results that the Army, the Navy and the Air Force spoke of. Now, more than 100 terrorists, including some high-value terrorists, were killed in Indian Armed Forces initial operations. More than 35 to 40 Pakistani Army personnel were killed when India responded to ceasefire operations. This still remains an ongoing operation, Operation Sindoor. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's defense correspondent, Shivani Sharma, joining me on this broadcast. Sandeep Unnithan, my colleague with me on this broadcast. Also with us is Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav, somebody who's been associated with the strategic weapons of the Indian Armed Forces. But first to you, Shivani, bring us the key highlights of what General Rajiv Ghai said, what Admiral Pramod said, and what Air Marshal Bharti said.
Gaurav, this was a detailed press briefing where the DGMOs of the Army, Navy and the Air Force have brought out the details and how they have also acknowledged that we have achieved what we wanted to. We were measured in our responses, we've inflicted losses, and the number of these losses towards Pakistan is around 35 to 40 only at the line of control. That means the numbers inside Pakistan that include the airbase loss can be many. The assessments are going on. The second important thing is that we've lost 5 men in uniform during these operations. That is also important, and the way homage was paid to these men in uniform who've achieved the targets. We also have given a very strong message, Gaurav, that we are alert on all times, at all times, even as we speak. And the preparedness is high. We have achieved the targets. We never wanted any kind of escalation. Whatever we have done is in a responsive mode, because Pakistan chose to attack and engage with us in terms of the aerial intrusions, the line of control, artillery shelling, and also the combined strength of our forces was also depicted in this press briefing, Gaurav, where the DGMOs of all the 3 services were present there. They have already told that we were in a strategically strong response position across 3 services, be it the land, the air and also the sea. So we are prepared for any kind of action. If any misadventure once again comes, then Pakistan will have to take a very hard hit from India.
You know, and over the course of the next 1 hour, and I want you to stay with me, Shivani, as you bring in Kamaljeet Kaur Sandhu also in this conversation. Sandeep, we will go through the damage that was inflicted across the international border, not just to the terrorist training camps, launch pads, headquarters, but also to the Pakistan Armed Forces, and not just to their prestige. Sargodha targeted, Pasrur targeted, Bolari, their latest airbase, the newest airbase of Pakistan targeted, Jacobabad, which houses their F-16s, that's been targeted. Sargodha, could you ever think Sargodha, Sandeep, could be targeted? That is like the oldest, biggest, largest and the best protected airbase of Pakistan, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. Sargodha is not an ordinary airbase. Globally, it's a strategic airbase. Everybody who's there in the business of analyzing and studying nuclear weapons sites knows Sargodha is the airbase near where the Pakistan military keeps its nuclear weapons. There is a hill complex very close to Sargodha, which is where the nuclear weapon sites are located, the vaults where the bombs are actually kept, and where Pakistan would then take the weapons out of that in case of an alert and then, proceed to load them onto aircraft and to mate them onto long-range ballistic missiles. So Sargodha's targeting is no accident, Gaurav. It's a huge, huge strategic signal from India to the Pakistan military that if you think that your days of protecting terrorism with nuclear weapons is going to continue indefinitely, 2025 is when it comes to an end.
It just comes to an end. You're so right. It's just come to an end. Pakistan's nuclear blackmail has been called out, and how all Pakistani military air bases, all Pakistani frontline military air bases on the Indian side, on the facing India, have been targeted. But Kamaljeet, it's been a measured strike. It's for effect. It's demonstrated. But the impact is, we can do it today, we can do it again, and next time it will be worse. The biggest takeaway, according to you, in terms of the posture along the LoC, and Kamaljeet, what's extremely significant, Pakistan sought a ceasefire. Immediately, some hours later, Pakistan violated ceasefire, and now India has put Pakistan on notice, Kamaljeet.
Well, absolutely, Gaurav. What we can tell you is what DGMO said. One, he said the targets were chosen, and was it successful? So he said yes. So this has been a successful mission, that is Operation Sindoor. 21 sites were identified, 9 of the sites were hit because the information was credible, and that is why what we know is it took time for this operation to really unfold before the world. It's because Pakistan had already strategized, pulled back a number of terrorists, but the results were that the 9 terror sites which were chosen as the targets, they were successfully bombed, and this is where 100 terrorists have been killed, some of them who have been wanted in IC-814 and the Pulwama terror attack. The other is obviously about Pakistan's own response, and that is what the DGMOs have clarified, that they were prepared with a blueprint for an all-out. That means there's a plan in action. This is already a work in progress as such, and that is what they've actually said, that if there's any sort of a response, one, it'll be a measured, calibrated response, and it'll be a fierce response. So the warning is already up as far as Pakistan is concerned. Remember, they've already violated the ceasefire just about yesterday, sending in drones, an act of provocation, but India has shown immense restraint. So today, there's another night, so we'll see whether Pakistan actually abides by that ceasefire or not. And the next 24 to 48 hours are extremely important, especially in the run-up to the talks between the DGMOs. So all this is a part of plan, and remember, those 21 sites continue to be under scanner, and they're saying Operation Sindoor is continuing at this point of time.
You know, you're so right. And the Indian Armed Forces, when they do their strategic messaging, it's so in plain sight. 9 sites have been taken down. That list contains 21, like we told you here on India Today. Before I bring in Sandeep, I want to bring in Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav. Also joining us on this special broadcast is Air Marshal Chaudhary, former Commandant of the National Defence College, a fighter pilot himself. Air Marshal Deeptandu Chaudhary, welcome on India Today. Air Vice Marshal Srivastav, the biggest takeaway according to you, and when you saw those images, when you saw all those images on India Today's television screens of the Pakistani air bases that have been targeted, Pasroor Air Defence Radar, devastated. Chunian Air Defence Radar, on the 7th and 8th of May, the radar head has been decapitated. That's the terminology used by Air Marshal Bharti. Arif Wala Air Defence Radar, gone. Sargodha Air Defence System, gone. And Sargodha, is that the biggest setback for Pakistan?
Gaurav, if you look at the operations which are carried out, they were so precise, and if you take suppression of enemy air defenses, all their radars have been taken out, which are major radars protecting major cities and major airfields. This is one of the very important things which happened. Now I'll come to the Muridike base. Muridike had all their UAVs and whatever Burke kind of ammunition they put on UAVs, they were also there. And if you take that out, it sends a very strong message that you are not safe, your UAVs are not safe. Then you went to Sargodha, and Sargodha gives a very phenomenal message. If you have no air defense system, no air defense network, how are you going to protect these assets? And they really put the terror into their ears. I'll tell you the one takeaway, which I will carry all the while, was the message from Masood Azhar himself, saying that Kash mein mar jata, Allah mujhe utha leta. The terror, the fear which went into the terrorists, Akas of terrorist network, that is our greatest gain. We have put that fear, we have knocked at their doorsteps, saying...
No, and we've actually knocked down that door when we destroyed their air defense. And Sandeep, is that your biggest takeaway, the 9 terrorist targets? You know, the manner in which the Indian armed forces have responded to the Pakistani terror threat. Not only were 9 targets taken down, the moment the Pakistanis responded the next day, the systematic manner in which Pakistan was punished, from Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, from Skardu down to their latest airbase in Sindh province.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And we've been talking about this on your show over the last couple of days, about how Operation Sindoor is not just one operation. It has several phases. It's important to understand all of those phases. And when they talk about gradual and calibrated escalation, this is how it unfolds. When you first have that first phase where you're targeting terrorist infrastructure, you're going in for leadership decapitation. Then you have the next phase of the operation where, when the Pakistan military responds with this unprecedented attack all across Indian towns, cities, over 3,000 kilometers, we launch a broad daylight strike, taking out their radar sites, attacking their military infrastructure. This was never there in phase 1 of Op Sindoor. You start doing that on phase 2. And then once again, when Pakistan doesn't get the message, retaliates, then we go on to phase 3, which is what we saw today: unprecedented damage, destruction on Pakistan airfields, radar sites, ammunition storage sites, drone sites, parking sites, runway dispersals. They are saying the, hangars where aircraft were parked. So many sites taken out all at once. The Indian Air Force showing that, when it's called to do the job, it's not going to step back. And there are several more, ladders in that escalation ladder, which we haven't explored yet, Gaurav. And from the briefing, it's very clear that this, the DGMOs were very clear that they had gone about it in a very calibrated manner. This whole project, this whole operation had been studied in great detail, and they had laid out all the options and how they would respond to all of Pakistan's provocation, beginning with Pahalgam, but not restricted to it.
And now any act of terror will be seen as an act of war. And Shivani, there still is clear and present danger, because if you look at the situation on ground zero right now, what are your sources telling you? And you spoke to the 3, the Director General Military Operations, Air Operations and Naval Operations. Is the threat of those Pakistani drones and ceasefire violations, is it still there? Is it as bad?
Gaurav, absolutely. What we were expecting yesterday, that there will be calm, but soon after the ceasefire was announced, there were drone action above the skies in the western sector. And we cannot trust Pakistan. We are all prepared. That's what the DGMOs also said, that we are up in our ante. We are all set, and our forces are on a high alert mode, because we know what Pakistan could be doing next. So the people, in fact, when we were reporting today on ground, the villages that were evacuated, there too the administration, Gaurav, has suggested those people to be in those safe places, return only after a few days, because the assessment on ground is going on. We cannot trust Pakistan. We have to see what happens tonight, and we have to verify whether the ceasefire is maintained across the line of control. So we are getting some inputs that we'll be divulging that what is happening on ground right now. We are all, the armed forces are on a high alert, Gaurav. We cannot trust Pakistan. The forces are on a high alert, and we are not actually preparing to down our defense. Defense is high, and we can expect any kind of action today too. So we are ready for it, and the DGMOs have also indicated the same.
So There is still is clear and present danger. Kamal, before I bring you in, let me quickly bring in Air Marshal Chaudhry, an ace fighter pilot, somebody who was there as part of TAG D and then at National Defence College. Air Marshal Chaudhry, your appreciation of the impact of Operation Sindoor so far. All pilots are fortunately back home and safe, but this operation continues. In your military appreciation, can Pakistan still try something, or after the punishment they've received all along their military bases facing India, they would be wiser now?
Thank you so much, Gaurav, for having me over. I'll just sort of quickly run through the whole thing. I think the Indian Air Force has demonstrated masterful escalation management. This conflict evolved from strikes on terror camps with long-range surface-to-surface missiles. A clinical SEAD, which was brought out by the other panelists, and thereafter it led to follow-on strikes of targeting their critical target, the terror targets. And when PAF retaliated in desperation, we upped the ante. We went and now hit their airfields in a series from the right from the north way down to the south. And this is something which is, if I may say, that it's a masterful synchronization of use of air power with surface and the naval elements, and well within the directions given, clear directions given, and well, beautifully escalation managed. And the immensely heartwarming part of it is that offensive air power has been used to drive home a message to an adversary who used to tom-tom their superiority of their air force
Yes.
all over the world. And this is
Yes.
one time, once again, right from 1947, 65, and 71, 1999, the PAF wasn't there. And this time around, I think it just clearly underscores the clinical sophistication and professionalism of the Indian Air Force, their hardcore, professional and tactical agility, enormous combat resilience, and above all, cold clinical aggression.
Cold, clinical precision with which terrorists have been neutralized. And when Pakistan Army came to defend terrorists and Pakistan Air Force came to defend terrorists, can you imagine an army or an Air Force coming in defense of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammad? They too were sent to their maker in several instances, and we will detail that out over the next several days. But Kamaljeet, details of terrorists killed, this is actually retribution for pain that India has suffered from IC-814 hijack, the Kandahar terror attack, the Parliament attack, 26/11 Mumbai attack, and a series of other terror attacks culminating in Pahalgam when Operation Sindoor was finally launched.
Well, all stops were pulled, and let me tell you that there has been provocation coming in from the from the Pakistani army, and Indian army has responded. What we've seen is planning, plotting, sending in non-state actors, be it Uri 2016, be it Pulwama terror attack in 2019, and continuous of this particular policy in 2025 by targeting innocent civilians, trying to instigate people, especially on basis of communal disharmony. This is the terror plan as far as Pakistan is concerned, but they lie totally exposed because one, not only did the Indian establishment identify those 9 spots, and let me tell you, there's a lot of homework done. It's not that Indian government doesn't know or the Indian intelligence does not know, but to have it calibrated has taken some time. But yes, there were precision strikes which were carried out, and this was a joint integrated force which came together. And what we saw was, whether it's hinterland, and let me tell you, what we know is the next 24 to 48 hours, because remember, what's being done at the borders and line of control is already something which is done, and there's a high guard even there. But even inside, we've been pointing out there is strong input that Jaish-e-Mohammad, Lashkar-e-Taiba, now these are terror tanzeems which are highly controlled by the Pakistan ISI and army. But what has hit home is Maulana Masood Azhar crying for his own relatives, his two brother-in-laws. What we've seen is Buridke being hit, the Lashkar-e-Taiba headquarters. So this is where it does seem that the restraint that the Pakistani army has at this point of time may not hold them very strong, because there is an input that they may retaliate, and the input is very strong, and that is why, whether it's about beefing up security establishment, temples, or even the river infrastructure, all this very heightened security. And what Indian government has already mentioned is that any act of terror will be counted as an act of war. So the message is loud and clear. Now the ball is back in Pakistan's court today, because remember, if there is any sort of provocation, they'll be hit hard. Now remember, as far as the terrorists are concerned, 100 of them have been killed, Pakistani planes have been downed, and thereafter what we know is in the artillery shelling, at least 35 to 40 army personnel of Pakistan have been killed.
And although all that information came out in public domain, when the Director Generals of Military Operation, Air Operations and Naval Operations not only held a press conference but gave details and satellite images of the destruction that had been carried out at Pakistani military bases from Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir down to Karachi and through Pakistan's Punjab province. Joining me now on this broadcast is John Spencer, Chair of Urban Warfare Studies. And John Spencer, your appreciation of the use of air power, employment of air power in punitive strikes against terrorism, whether it's at Muridke or at Bahawalpur, precision strikes carried out at terror headquarters.
Yeah, I mean, very impressive joint multi-domain operation by the Indian Air Force and military in general. I understand the real capability is required to do that, and the precision and proportionality that was used by the Indian Air Force to penetrate air defenses at will and strike the very important terror camps that India wanted to strike, but also to defend Indian cities and Indian sites with a multi-factor air defense system for the drones and all of that the Pakistan military sent towards India.
How do you see the Pakistan Army and the Air Force targeting India? Because India's point was that these were punitive strikes, so these were strikes being carried out against 9 bases of terrorism, whether it's Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammad or Hizbul Mujahideen, whether in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir or Pakistan's Punjab province, but the Pakistan Army and the Air Force choosing to respond.
Yeah, I mean, that's a telling example of the targets and the clear visibility and legitimacy of the Indian government to respond to this vicious terrorist attack, but then to highlight every site, what it is, why it's being struck, and then for Pakistan then to reply by striking at both civilian cities and military installations was a grave escalation of which we've seen continued. And the explanations by the Indian military, like that presser that we just saw, full detail of every site and why it was selected, is a real big part of a free society, a democratic society's explanation of why military operations are being conducted, that this state sponsored of terrorism won't continue. But the Pakistan military has answered by escalating, by striking at Indian military sites, which also have to be responded to.
So, and in your appreciation, in the international community, when you look at an army targeting a location in another country which is seen as a state sponsor of terror, and some of these are UN-designated terrorists or UN-designated terrorist organizations, one, is that legitimate targeting? Two, the response of the Pakistan Air Force in targeting civilian areas or attempting to target civilian areas in India, is that escalation?
Absolutely. Absolutely legitimate targets, explained, reasoned why, but also with extreme care, even in Lahore airport where they were still running international flights, the Indian military hit very specific targets and was very discriminate in their targets, absolutely legitimate targets, to include the perpetrators of the Daniel Pearl assassination. So terrorism that has been allowed to be sponsored by Pakistan for a long time. And no, I don't think that the response by Pakistan was legitimate. It was an escalation of what could have been stopped earlier in the operation, but that continued escalation. And finally, now that we have a very tentative or very fragile ceasefire that we hope will continue. But a lot of these decisions get made by Pakistan.
India has also made another point very clear. Any future act of terror against India will be seen as an act of war. How do you read that message?
I believe it is clear and credible. You only have deterrence if you have capability, which India has demonstrated, immense capability, and the will to use it. I walked the ground of the 2008 Mumbai attacks, and what India's
Yes.
response was only diplomatic, even though it was shown to be Pakistan ISI-sponsored Lashkar-e-Taiba attack. This is a clear signal that that's all done. India will respond to attacks by the sponsorship, which was the Pakistan military and the Pakistan government. So I think it's a very strong message, but also a credible message.
And since you've walked that ground, since you've seen 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, where the same Lashkar-e-Taiba at Muridke plotted an attack, and there's evidence that's going back to it, including David Coleman Headley from the United States of America, who underwent trial at that federal courtroom in Chicago and was convicted, of course, in the Copenhagen, in the Denmark terror attack case. But his involvement, his going to Muridke, or Ajmal Amir Kassab going to Muridke and Bahawalpur, all these places, legitimate targets taken down by India, and will that deter Pakistan from using terror as an instrument of state policy?
I mean, it wasn't clearly. Hopefully, this will be a change. This is a shift. I mean, when terrorism comes, the world should not allow it. So this is about more than India as well. But India's change of its message and its actions. There will be no tolerance of any terrorist attacks on Indian soil. But this is a global problem. So Pakistan's continued sponsorship, training, funding, deployment of these terrorists is a global issue that the pressure needs to be applied in many factions of national power, not just by India, but I think in the global community.
And unfortunately, the global community really hasn't come up, and done so effectively. It should have done that a long time back. It really hasn't. But post India's actions against Pakistan, in terms of not just against terror, targeting 9 terror hubs, but targeting 11 military bases, will the world be forced to, one, take notice? Two, has India, in your appreciation, been able to call out Pakistan's nuclear bogey, that any response against terrorism in Pakistan, and especially in Pakistan's Punjab province, could lead to a nuclear escalation? With Operation Sindoor, has that nuclear bogey been called out?
I mean, I think it should be called out. This is the problem that we see globally. Just because you have nuclear weapons doesn't mean you get to violate all international norms and rattle a nuclear saber. But it is, of course, a very concerning issue that nobody wants to see that continued escalation. And that's why I really appreciate India's efforts to show legitimacy, proportionality, discrimination in the targets and why they're doing them. So there is no reason to escalate. Nobody's threatening Pakistan as a state and its sovereignty and its ability to function, but rattling the nuclear saber, it shouldn't be allowed. But we should also globally understand that attacks on India, like these terrorist attacks, can't continue. So there should be caution, of course. I'm hoping that Pakistan takes their words and actually wants de-escalation and doesn't continue to escalate, despite the superior military capability that India has shown, but also the resolve to do what's necessary to protect India. I hope it doesn't continue escalation. And no, I don't think that nuclear saber rattling should be a part of that conversation. Nobody wants that, and it is reckless when a nation does that. But I think the globe has taken attention, and we've seen even the United States president and others are taking attention. But this is also a matter that needs to be resolved.
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter that needs to be resolved. But clearly, that's something where terror gun cannot be put to India's head. Stay with me for a moment, John Spencer. You're joining us from Colorado. The United States itself is a victim of this radical Islamist terror. It's dealt with it, to an extent, but then India is next door to terror. Let me also bring into this conversation Air Marshal Chaudhry once again as we speak of India's air power. Has the air power once again proven to be India's weapon of choice to punish terror. It was the weapon of choice in Balakot, one target, but here it was weapon of choice to punish 9 terror targets and then 11 military hubs when Pakistan chose to escalate, sir.
Yes, most certainly, Gaurav. Air power has always been in the front edge of a conventional warfare. But when it comes to sub-conventional warfare on the terror scale, which is in the lower end of the spectrum, I think we did that first in Balakot, and we have done it again. Now, I want to highlight a couple of points here. In the Balakot action, the strategic objective was, the narrative was altered by the single loss that we had and the
Yes.
world of Abhinandan shooting down. And the entire focus all over the world, including the media, shifted to that, stealing the narrative of credibility of that strike, which was a really effective strike. So this time around, 9 targets were hit out of 21. That's half the number of targets. That means we could have as well have hit all 21 of them as well. But we chose to hit 9 because on the credible information available. But this time around, you would notice there is imagery all over. There is clear awareness. A lot of media has done a spectacular role this time, wherein the effects were visible to people all around the world. And what is important here is that the follow-on action where the entire air defense was activated, do understand we have 1,000 kilometer of frontage, which is, I think, a scale which most of the current wars can't even imagine all over the world. So it's a warfare, war fighting or air operations at an enormous scale, which just shows the scale and the depth of the combat stamina and the resilience of the Indian Air Force and its capabilities. We are struck inside deep, we are struck inside hard, very, very graduated manner. And probably, if I may, be a little simplistic about it, the best is yet to come. But what we must bear in mind at the end of all this, where has been the Pakistani Air Force? The Pakistani Air Force in the past has always thrived on trying to build a myth on the number of engagements and kills and losses. It's always been they've always tried to trade that and to show the Indian Air Force down. But what is important here is losses are a part of professional, repertoire of any professional service. What
No,
matters
what is actually heartening? What is actually heartening is all the pilots have come back home safe.
Yes, if I
all
may
the
finish.
targets have been punished. All the targets have been punished, not just terrorist targets, but when Pakistan escalated, all military targets have also been punished. Significance of these military targets in your appreciation, sir?
If I may just finish by the last point which I was trying to make,
Yes.
is that at the end of the day, what really matters is achievement of the strategic objectives. And that was, I think, clearly underscored by the DG Air Operations in his talk today. And now look at the targets that we have hit. They're all critical target systems, well inside, graded to the manner, to the role and specifics required. The targeting of their air defense systems, of the radars and other sites, was to create space for the rest of the missions to go through and successfully. And the kind of standoff targeting which you have done, and this is, I think, a huge win for some of the weapons, especially the BrahMos, which is a huge pat in the back for the Indian industry. So this is something, this is a first in many ways. And I will end with just give others a chance here to step in with just one fact that at the end of the day, this has brought back the centrality of air power and the fact that wide spectrum of operations it can undertake from the lower end of the non-contact kinetic spectrum that is
Yes.
targeting terrorists to right up to the conventional scale within the nuclear umbrella.